Hi there, I'm Lee Prescott. I'm the lead bike fitter here at Velo Atelier, and today we're going to talk about how to choose your perfect saddle and avoid some of the common pitfalls. So when people come to see us about saddle discomfort, the very first thing we check is that the saddle is actually in the right place in the first place. 9 times out of 10, when people are coming in talking about being uncomfortable, they're expecting me to instantly just put a new saddle on there. And I would say the majority of the time, actually the saddle is fine. It's just in the wrong place. So if your saddle isn't the correct height and fore and aft and angle, it's never going to work for you. So first and foremost, we need to get it in the right place. Once you know that your saddle is in the correct position on your bike, we then need to look at what style of saddle is going to work best for your position. You can pretty much break down saddles into 2 main categories. You have saddles that are relatively flat, and these encourage a more aggressive or rotated position. You've then also got saddles that are more of a curved shape and curved in both planes. These, when set up level, tend to, rather than be aimed at aggressively rotated pelvises, work better for more upright positions. So consider what your position is like when choosing a saddle. So one of the other key things to consider when selecting a new saddle is the level of padding you think you might require. Obviously you can get saddles with no padding whatsoever, and these can be comfortable if they're the correct shape for your position. However, I'm not sure I'd want to ride one of these on gravel, for instance. At the other end of the spectrum, there's now a new kind of wave of 3D printed saddles coming through that work in a slightly different way to most padded saddles. If you consider padding on a saddle, essentially when you sit on it, the areas of higher pressure are going to compress that padding and actually make that padding harder. 3D printed saddles work in a slightly different way to that. Rather than compressing, they deform. So it's almost like sitting on a hammock. We always keep one of these in stock. They are more expensive, but if you're finding it really difficult to get comfortable on any other saddle and you've followed all of the steps that we're going to talk about in this video, then this might be an option. But I wouldn't go to it as first port of call. A real common misconception is that once you find a saddle that works well for you, it will work for you on all of your bikes. That's only the case if your position on all of your bikes is exactly the same. If they're all road bikes, that is possible. But I wouldn't expect a saddle that works on a mountain bike to then work equally well on your road bike. Okay, you have to match the saddle to the amount of pelvic rotation. So if you're more rotated on your road bike, that's going to require a different style and shape of saddle to a mountain bike where you're likely sitting much more upright, because the pressure zones are going to be angled differently and the saddle needs to be designed to suit that. So I'm sure some of you will have been to bike stores where they have equipment to measure your sit bones. Okay, what that's doing is typically through a gel pad, or you can even do it with like a sheet of corrugated cardboard. You sit down on it, and when you get up it leaves some depressions which then get measured centre to centre to give you your sit bone width. This is not the be all and end all of choosing your saddle. It's an interesting metric, but actually doesn't hugely help when selecting a saddle. What you're doing is you're basically measuring the distance between these 2 points here. These are called the ischial tuberosities, and these are not really where you're sitting when you're on a saddle. You're placing your weight between there and this bit here, which is called the pubic rami. You're essentially sitting on a saddle like that. And if you really look, actually correctly stabilized on this saddle, the ischial tuberosities are not actually even contacting the saddle. So their width isn't the be all and end all of how to select a saddle. A more important part is the center section of the saddle where you'll actually be engaging with it, and also the width of your thighs has a big impact on saddle width, not the width of your pelvis. So if you look at a typical saddle, if you place your hand on the nose and butt it up against the end, the bit that's visible is likely to be the bit you're actually going to be sitting on. So the shape of this is the bit that's most important when selecting your saddle, and matching that to your pelvis and your pelvic angle. So a technology that a lot of good bike fitters will be using is called pressure mapping, and I'm sure some of you will have seen or used this. Pressure map basically is a pressure sensor mat that you can place over your saddle, and that then can measure how you're sitting when you're on the saddle and give you really interesting data around the way the pelvis is located on the saddle. So the pressure map on the saddle whilst you're riding gives the bike fitter this view of how you're applying your pressure to your saddle through your pedal stroke. And this gives a good fitter lots of information. If we look at this pressure map, this is an aggregation of a 5-second clip of riding. And what it's showing me is the maximum pressures in all of the areas on the saddle during that period. So I can see this rider is sitting more heavily on the right hand side of the saddle, and that will be impacting his stability and his ability to pedal effectively. With the information here, knowing that that pelvis is sitting harder on the right hand side of the saddle, that then gives a bike fitter the ability to investigate the rest of the position, trying to determine what's causing that. It could be that the back has got some asymmetries and it's holding the pelvis into torsion. It could be that there's a leg length differential. It might just be habit because they've sat on a saddle that's the wrong shape or size for an amount of time. And that's one of the bigger things that we often have to deal with, is reteaching movement patterns to people who have got into a habit of sitting in a specific way due to the saddle being incorrect. Just like any technology used within bike fitting though, this is not a case of computer says yes or no. It's a measurement tool that the bike fitter is then utilising to collect data to make his assumptions and work out how he's going to alter things. A pressure map alone does not tell you how to fit someone to that bike or which saddle is going to be perfect. It's a good bit of guidance for the fitter, but ultimately it's that fitter's experience and knowledge that's the most important bit, not the piece of technology. So I think my key piece of advice here is, if you are uncomfortable in your saddle, do something about it rather than waiting for you to end up getting injured or have saddle sores appear. There's no reason to be uncomfortable in the saddle. There is a position and saddle for everybody out there. And if you're not comfortable with trying to work through it yourself, just go and find your closest qualified fitter and they'll put it right for you.